So in this next part, we're going to export the data without the schema into a separate file. So I'm going to jump back to the command line. And the very basic form of what we need is this, which is mysqldump. And then we're passing it the username and prompting for a password. And we're passing the skip extended insert parameter. What this will do is create an individual line for each entry in each table. Now, if we didn't pass this, the export would create an import statement that included all of the rows in one statement. Now, while this is quicker for performance, when it comes to version controlling line by line, what this means is that whenever there's a change to an entry in a table, then it changes that whole command. And when we look at a diff statement in Git, for example, it will look like the entire table has changed instead of just one line or a small aspect of one line. So again, what this does is create an insert statement for each row. So if one row changes in the database, we only see that one row changed when we look at a diff statement. And again, we're just specifying the name of the database and where we want to put it. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and put in my password. And now if we jump back to the File Explorer, we'll see our Git site data here. And you can see that the file size is a lot larger than the schema. It's about 10 times the size. And this is before we've even added any content to our database. Now, if you really do plan on version controlling your database content, then you want to extend this command out a bit to exclude tables that include temporary data. So we want to keep the table definitions inside of the schema export, but when it comes to content, we don't need them, like our watchdog table and any cache tables. So this is the command that we're going to use for that. So it starts out the same as above. We got mysqldump, our username, a prompt for a password, and skip extended insert. But then we add a set of ignored tables with the ignored table parameter. So each time the parameter is used, you see it used multiple times here, it can point to a single table, or if it uses a wildcard, it can point to tables that begin with a certain string. And each time you point to a table to ignore, you also need to specify the database that it belongs to, even though we mention it a little bit later in the command. So we have ignored table here, and then equal sign, and then the name of our database, .watchdog. So this will ignore the watchdog table. This next one will ignore cache, and then anything that comes after cache. So if we look at a list of our tables, we'll see that there are multiple cache tables for different modules, and this will ignore them all, so we don't need to add each one explicitly here. And this also means that this command will scale as we add more cache tables to the database. We also can ignore the sessions table and multiple tables that have to do with search. So this will help reduce the size of our export quite a bit if we're definitely going to be adding it to version control. This can also be useful when you're exporting just on a regular basis outside of version control, because the smaller the export, the quicker it will be to import. And usually the less space that something takes up, the better. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and I'm going to enter my password and hit enter again. And now if we jump back to the folder, we'll see that our data hasn't shrinked much. It's still 963 kilobytes, but we'd see this change quite a bit as soon as we started using the site. Okay, so now that we've got these exported, we need to add them to our assets folder. And we can do that either by downloading these from our production site via FTP, or again, creating a separate repository that's outside of the web root that's on the develop branch and adding it and committing it there. Since all of this is in a local environment for me, I'm simply going to cut these and paste them into the other site. I'm going to paste them into the assets folder here.